It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, happy Pride, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that is dedicated to standing up for justice and equality in all forms and for all people. I'm Bianca. Our resident sexpert, Christy Powell, is off on a super secret mission to the Icelandic Phallological Museum to steal a huldufólk penis for science. And Kristen's going to kill me for mispronouncing the name of her elvish people. With me today is Johnny, a straight, cis, white man. Johnny has been climbing the rungs of the ACA ladder and has finally made it to the top, the pinnacle, Secular Sexuality. Johnny, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, V. How are you doing?
Doing good. All right, so we are going to jump right in, but first, a note about what's been going on. This week is the first week of Pride and the second week of ongoing police brutality protests, which were sparked by the murder of George Floyd. I don't know about you, but I'm working through a lot of fear, pain, and discomfort right now, as I should be, as we all should be. This is not a time to be comfortable or to look the other way. This is a time for growth, no matter how painful or uncomfortable that is. So before we start talking about allyship for all sorts of people, which is what this episode is going to be about, I want to get very specific in saying Black Lives Matter. All right. So I've broken this show down into 3 segments: education, intervention, and advocacy. So those are kind of the 3 topics we're going to be discussing tonight. And if you're interested in talking about allyship with us, get in touch. We are at 512-991-9242. That's 512-991-9242. We would love to hear from you, and we have lines open. So feel free to call in. Johnny, let's talk a little bit about you before we get into all of this. Tell us about you. Tell us about your work at the ACA and kind of what you do.
What I do is I help out wherever I can. I've been on the crew. I've been on a whole bunch of shows: Godless Bitches, Truth Wanted, AXP, Atheist Vanguard, nonprofits, and like you said, the very apex of all shows, Secular Sexuality.
Yep.
The hardest part has actually been working with the crew, since everything comes through the crew. And I'm sure the crew has been very patient with me, educating me and watching me struggle and ask the same questions over and over again. But I appreciate everyone's patience and guidance in that. You and I have talked about, hey, would you like to be on the show? And honestly, as a cis white het male person, I've been racking my brain, like, what can I contribute to this? And thankfully we've talked about it, and allyship is legitimate and important. And I've been trying to do it probably my whole life. And educating myself as time goes on, starting as a stupid young person who should have known better, and hopefully progressing to someone who's not a jackass.
That's the end goal, ultimately. Just don't be a jackass, guys.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, we've had a couple conversations and trying to figure out exactly what we could be talking about, because there is, as weird and counterintuitive as this sounds, coming from somebody who is not this, but there is a place out there for the cishet white man. Just so you know, Johnny, there is a place for you in this movement. But no, allyship is important. We're not going to get anywhere unless people who have more social clout in various areas and various forms of privilege speak up and talk to each other and make and advocate for change. So we are going to talk about educating ourselves and how to best do that. We're going to talk about intervening and when that's necessary, and what advocacy looks like across the board. Again, though, I am going to plug our lines so that people can get in touch with us. That's 512-991-9242. All right. Okay. So, Johnny, let's talk about education first. There has been a lot of talk about educating oneself the last couple of weeks, rightly so.
Right.
There are good ways to go about educating yourself, and there are less good ways to go about educating yourself. But before we get into the how and how to responsibly learn things without demanding the time or attention or emotional labor of others, we have to first break down why it's important. Why is it important that we constantly educate ourselves in areas of all forms?
Well, I think one of the most important things a person can do who does interact in the world is to challenge your own beliefs, to make sure that they're not only up to date as far as what people are concerned about, but that you have the best information available to you, that you critically investigate the world around you, that you do personal audits of your own beliefs and actions. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to get the best information all the time. But if you're trying to find more and better information and you're sincere about it, I think you're going to be on the path. The best thing, I think, is to try to find information that doesn't agree with you. I have good friends who, although they've been the victim of this, they tend to look for news sources, scholarly articles, viewpoints that agree with what they already believe. And that's really easy to do. I've talked about it on different shows that I've been on. I'm not Republican, I'm not conservative, but I have frequently gone to the National Review, different conservative sources for news and information, just to try to find out what people are talking about, how do they frame the issues. And that way you can have a more meaningful conversation on an issue. Because so often, and you saw this with All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, that people are saying similar things, but they're not saying the same thing and they talk past each other. It's so unnecessary. And I think we get in our echo chambers and we just kind of stay there. So that's my number.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. If it makes you uncomfortable, you probably have to do more research into it, either because it's making a claim that deep down is your spidey sense is tingling. This might not be accurate. I need to go do some research, or otherwise it might be trying to pop that bubble a little bit and expose you to a new mindset that might help you broaden your horizons. And it's important as well, because if you are educated to a point, and I'm using the term educated here, I don't mean to be elitist about this. This is not saying you have to go get a particular degree or you have to read certain books. This is just the concept of always bettering yourself in your understanding of the world around you. That's kind of where we're going with this definition. So if you are educated to a point about a subject, then you kind of fall into what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is you think you know a lot more about a thing than you actually do. And it actually makes you more certain. Like, the more you think you know, the less you probably know about a subject, the more confident you feel that you have all the angles figured out. It's kind of a little bit of a yellow flag that maybe you're missing something, maybe you need to do a little bit more work. The reason this is dangerous in forms of allyship is that there are ways to attempt to be an ally and to attempt to educate yourself and others. But if you're not using accurate information, or you're using outdated information, that's actually going to harm your point, because people are going to be able to come at you with an objection to that information that may be false or outdated, and eventually end up dismantling your argument and doing more damage to the cause in general. And to highlight this, I just want to give a little bit of an example here. I'm a manager at my job, and we are required to do anti-harassment training, which is great. During the anti-harassment training portion of the sexual harassment training portion of this, they explicitly described situations where a trans or non-binary individual might have to deal with gender expression forms of discrimination, which I thought was great. Good job on you. You've got that involved in your training. So thank you. But the entire rest of the training, apart from that one tiny 5-minute section, it talked about men and women, the two genders, either or both. It talked about the gender or sex that someone is or identifies with, just very small, subtle things that I don't think were intentionally meant to be considered microaggressions or misinformation, but was just a result of probably not updating their language and their understanding of an issue to where it actually currently was in society. So that's just a small issue. Great that they're including it. I love that was something we had to talk about at work. But at the same time, it was very clear that the education went to a point and no further. So that's one example of that. Sorry, you look like you're going to.
I look like a lot of things.
I've
had those trainings too, and good for your work that they even address these issues. I do not remember that being an issue that was discussed when I was in government work.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there was ever a hostile attitude there. In fact, I did work for a governmental agency many years ago where there was a transgender person, and I was surprised that there was no training on that.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, I wonder also, some of these training videos are pretty old.
Right, exactly.
Sort of the joke is that.
But no, and this is a thing as well. You can, just because you have done a necessary first step in a direction doesn't mean that that's all you need to do. So I feel like a lot of the time there's this tension because a lot of people right now are being asked to learn a lot of things that they should already know, and they don't. Yeah. And that's a result of that bubble we were talking about. That's a result of echo chambers. That's a result of upbringing and a whole lot of stuff. But they are being asked to learn and think about new things. And so they say, well, I already got here. I was here before and I got here. Isn't that enough? Why do I have to continue to do stuff? I made this effort. Can I stop now?
Yeah.
And yay, good for you. You got here. That's not everybody can, not everybody will. That's a good thing. But you're not done. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to constantly be learning and growing and educating yourself.
Yeah. Do you remember Achilles sulking in his tent and Mentor comes in and he's pouting over, he didn't get a sex slave. And Mentor is like, you got to get out there. You got to continue. And Achilles says, I have already done so much. I've carried the war. And Mentor is like, no one cares what you did. All they're going to remember is you're the guy that planted his feet and went no further. You're the guy that took no further action. And that and some other things, but ultimately it was his dead lover who motivated him. I have dear friends who have made significant progress. I think I have, and I'm always on the lookout for, what have I done? What have I said? And that comes with just being self-aware, not to be on autopilot, not to rest on your laurels. But there's also tends to be an attitude, and I think it happens as we get older, not all people, but where your views of the world can calcify, and then you're no longer open and welcome to new ways of people expressing themselves, finally, after centuries or thousands of years of having to hide or having to alter their behavior. Now we're in a place where, although not everywhere in the world, now people can speak out. They have the relative safety that we didn't have 100 years ago. And in those places where those people are speaking out, it behooves us to engage in that conversation, to understand where people are coming from. In preparation for this show, I looked up what can folks like me, and I'm a lot of things, but what can folks like me, my demographic, what can I do to be an ally? And
Man, a guest who researches before the show. I feel spoiled now. This is awesome.
That's the very least I could do. But no, and it made me think, what have I done lately? I've had conversations with some friends in the past, and I remember having a kind of a 90s understanding of gay rights, right? Of gay identity.
Yeah.
The landlord,
there are a lot of people who think I liked Will and Grace, so that means that I'm good. And that's not, I mean, good for you. Not everybody can get to that point, but also you can't stop there. The world is moving on and you need to move with it.
Right. And to really engage in the conversation, you need to understand, I think, both sides of an argument, or the many sides of an argument, and really talk to the people who are affected most, the people who have the struggle, and don't just say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. It frankly doesn't make one bit of difference if a particular position makes sense to you. If you respect someone else, you can take their word that this is their experience, and then try to put yourself in their experience and believe them.
And this is something that I think a lot of people get confused about as well, because I know a lot of atheist, skeptical people who have not come along on that part of the journey. And they treat everything with this kind of, well, prove to me that. And in certain areas, that's important. When you're making a prescriptive claim about the world, there is this, there is that, it's an ontological claim, then yes, you need that proof. You need to be able to be convinced of that claim. But when somebody is describing something that is descriptive, that is just their experience, and they are not making a claim about an ontological fact, that needs to be treated differently. The reason that non-binary people exist is because, hi, I'm V, I call myself non-binary, therefore non-binary people, at least one, exists. It's a descriptive claim. So there are levels to this as well, and I want to make sure that we are advocating for both, because this is an ACA production, and we are skeptics, and we are going to ask questions, but there is also space for empathy and for understanding and for making room for other experiences at the table.
Right.
So I've got a question about how to responsibly educate yourself. What are some good research hygiene best practices in your experience? Because you have experience researching and gathering facts and data. You talked a little bit with Matt on one of his atheist debates project interviews about being a lawyer and having that background. So how do you research things in a way that makes allowances for that skepticism and for the ability to ask questions, while also being empathetic and being aware that your worldview is open to change and should be?
Well, something that I'm about to say might not be the most popular position all the time, but I try to withhold my conclusions until I've gathered information. As an attorney, I have often found myself reviewing a case file and saying to myself, oh no, this is terrible. And going into a case with dread that I would have to either argue for a position that I found to be objectionable, or not agreeing with one side or the other. But over time, was it once bitten, twice shy, or fool me once? I don't know what would be the right one, but saying to myself, okay, hold on one second. Let me gather all these facts. Let me put them in a box. Let me now find out what the other side says. Let me examine that. And then let me try to find independent verification, what seems to be a non-biased position for that. This happens with every single case. Oftentimes, the truth is quite nuanced. It's not sitting in front of you. It needs to be dug at. And as I discussed, and thank you for watching that, by the way. So it's good to know.
I did my research too.
Thank you. That there's oftentimes no magic bullet, no silver bullet that will give you all the answers that you need. The truth is out there, but it's hidden. It's disguised as sometimes an innocuous piece of information. And so I think withholding judgment so that when you find new information, you haven't poisoned the well in your mind.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Yeah, tying yourself to your interpretation of a piece of information is a hazardous thing to do. If you put your self-worth in a particular opinion, then if that opinion is confronted and shown to be wrong, that can feel very much like, how dare you attack me? But there's a big difference between an opinion being wrong and you holding a wrong opinion and somebody attacking you personally. So when you come across something like these protests, for example, if they are saying things in these speeches that they're giving, in these calls to action that make you feel uncomfortable and challenge an opinion that you have about the world, there can be that instinct to close off, to say, well, all lives matter, to say, well, I'm not going to listen because X, Y, Z. And it's very easy to rationalize why you should or should not listen or do something or say something. We were talking a little bit on the live stream before this show. You're always going to find a reason not to do something. You're always going to find a reason not to believe something if you really don't want to. So the trick here is to make sure that you are divorcing your emotions from your opinions as much as you can and say, hey, here is something that I consider to be a fact. Let's put this through the ringer. Let's see how other people see this. Let me talk with people who see the world differently. Let me listen to things that make me uncomfortable, because either I'm going to find ways to refute that and strengthen my position that I've already held, or I'm going to find a way to revamp it and change it and shift it to meet the new information that I've come across.
Right. Also, there needs to be a paradigm shift as far as being okay with being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we start off thinking that we're correct, but there are some politicians out there who have never been wrong in their entire life.
Quite a feat.
That's amazing. Yeah. God mode enabled, right? And that's just not possible. I'm right. I'm wrong all the time. Right all the time too. I'm wrong all the time. And when I critically examine, I mean, judges have told me I'm wrong constantly, and I still disagree with them. But in those instances where I am proven wrong or shown to be wrong, or there's subtlety to a position that I didn't understand, I don't think it's a position of weakness at all. It's a position of weakness to hunker down in your beliefs and shut out all information, because then you're just dooming yourself to ignoring the world. I can't stand it.
Yeah, and it's one of the most crucial elements of being an ally is opening yourself up to different experiences. And I know I have a friend right now who is struggling with this because some of their family is very I'm talking about a friend, I swear it's an actual friend. I'm not like making vague references to myself. A friend of mine is struggling with their family who's very conservative. That is also my plight. But there's this tendency to only quote diverse voices when they agree with you. And if you're only finding that you find people to quote of a particular demographic who tend to agree with your worldview, you don't appreciate diversity. That's not what that is. You're appreciating the status quo being maintained. So there's something as well. It might be a little bit trickier, and there's where that parsing happens. Great, you quoted Obama here. Great, you quoted this person or that person. That's awesome. But look at the content of that. Is it backing up your own worldview? Is it making you feel more comfortable about the position you're holding? Or is it challenging you and opening you up to new ideas and new information? Before we jump to a call, because we have one and then we have an email that I would love to get to, I do want to just express this. And this is for all of my friends out there, whether you are cis, het, white, anyone, Johnny, you, me to a certain extent as well, of course. There is a difference between doing research and going to people in your life and asking them to do research for you. I know for me, it has been one of my greatest privileges and also one of the most draining things I've had to deal with is talk with people about gender on Twitter. This is my life now. This is what I do. I talk to people about gender on Twitter. And if they're in good faith, then it's a good conversation. But even then, it's asking me to do the work. Hey, V, you have this experience. It's not how can I understand you and be better. It's tell me about gender. Teach me these things that I could very easily Google on my own. Give me resources. Give me books. Give me thought processes or experiments. Tell me how I am oppressing you and how I should stop. And that, more than anything else, I know it comes from a place of wanting to help and a place of loss because a lot of us, we haven't been taught about our privilege, right? We haven't been put in a position where we are taught this is what you're doing wrong and this is how you should stop. We don't have that access available. So it's very tempting to say, hey, you other person who's going through a whole lot right now and has other important shit to deal with, tell me how I'm doing. Affirm me in my desire to be a good person and teach me how to be better. And the motive there is good, I think, a lot of the time. But the way it's approached can be extremely draining and, once again, relegate the people you're trying to support into resources that you are consuming. So when you're doing research, when you're continuing to broaden your horizon and figure out ways to grow your worldview, make sure you're doing it in a way that doesn't rely on the emotional availability and labor of other people.
This is something that I've thought of too, is let's say you have somebody who falls into a demographic that is new to you and suddenly you're woke.
All of a sudden.
Good for you, right? You've discovered a new thing, a new way of existing. That's great. But your friend who is now non-binary doesn't need to only talk about non-binary stuff with you every single time.
Right.
Or whatever it might be, right? There's so many comedy sketches where, there's two African-American guys at the bar and everyone that comes up to them has to talk about, there's a Key and Peele one that's really great, right? I'm really into jazz, Black Lives Matter, maybe don't pigeonhole people into one particular group. It's maybe your heart might be in the right place. Maybe you are frothing with guilt over some things that you did and said or believed or let happen without speaking up. But the other thing that I would say is we talked a little bit about it, and I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, so stop me if I need to. But the idea of, that old internet notion of being a white knight.
Yes.
Right? Are we going to talk about that later, or can I talk about
certainly. We are talking about intervention next, and I think that is a beautiful segue. So let us definitely get into the whole white knight situation because, man, I've got stories. But for now, let's jump to a call.
Right.
We are talking with Laurie in Texas. Hi, Laurie. Can you hear us?
Hi, V.
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, V. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi. What can we talk with you about today? We are good.
Well, I'm really kind of excited that we're continuing to celebrate Pride. With everything going on and around in secular sexuality, that's a big thing for me.
Oh, yay.
As a non-binary person. With my fiance, we've been in a monogamous relationship because, we're just kind of distracted with each other at the moment. But fully understand that as non-binary people, we have other attractions and things like that. And I think a lot of times we get bogged down with sexuality in our culture because a lot of times it has a lot of bad baggage that's been put upon by religion. In our society, we're taught certain things growing up about inappropriate behavior or appropriate behavior. What is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is okay, and what is a sin.
Yeah.
And as an atheist, both of us, I think morality has to, people always ask, how do you get your morality? For us, it's a harm analysis. There are a lot of choices in life that you have to choose one way or another. And I think for us, basically, our morality lays with the less harm is done, to no harm is done. And I feel that in a relationship that is secular, you get to make those rules about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I think the big thing for us is just honesty and making sure we're both on the same page and we're both a part of the experience and we're both together in it. So I just wanted to call and kind of give you my view on that.
Yes.
What is it? Secular sexuality.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mouthful. No pun intended.
It is. Or was it?
Everyone wins. That's perfect. No, I really appreciate you calling in. And I agree with you 100%. One of the best parts about leaving religion for me was realizing that if a certain kind of relationship didn't work for me, that didn't mean that I was doomed. I was in even after deconverting, I was in a very standard traditional relationship where I was with a cishet guy and we were monogamous, and he would go to work in the morning and I'd stay home and I'd make food. And then in the evening we'd watch a movie and go to bed. And it was a very like domestic kind of idyllic setup for a lot of people. And I just felt myself dying in there and just really hating who I had become and kind of where I was going. And I couldn't see my future clearly or in any way that was exciting or interesting. So knowing that is just one option. That is one thing. And for some people, that's exactly perfect and that's great. But for other people who need some other form of relationship, there are other options out there that are just as good, that are just as valid, that are just as quote unquote moral. As long as, again, I think you were on point. Honesty, communication, consent. If these things are present, then go for it. Have fun.
Go for it. Yeah, love is love.
And multiply.
Love is love. Exactly. I have a best friend, and we were going to get married after I got my divorce, my first time getting into a relationship, and that's basically how it was. Mm-hmm. I made the money, and I cooked, and I cleaned, and everything was sterile, and I was suffocating. And my best friend, there was a long time I was like, we're just going to get married in our old age and take care of each other. And then I got in a relationship, she got married, and I was like, if your husband ever dies, you can marry So that's the big thing now. She comes and hangs out with us all the time. And I'm like, one day, right? One day.
Oh, my goodness. That's
Laurie,
funny.
can I ask you, did you grow up?
Income. I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, Laurie. Did you grow up religious and then become an atheist?
Yes. That was the longest road I can ever. I was brought up in the church. I was a children's choir director at age 12, singing in the adult choir. Always worked until about a month ago. I've been working in the church as a music minister.
Wow.
And for a long time I did it because, my big thing is I'm humanist first. And I have a particular set of skills that people needed at the time. And I was needed. My mother went to that church. And so my whole family started going and singing in the choir. And it was kind of the experience. And now that I'm kind of out of it, went through infertility, all that stuff, bad marriage. And there was a lot of things that people kept saying to me that started ringing hollow and then started making me think, like, God has a plan. God's not going to give you a child and you are ready for that child. And I look around as a teacher at all the kids that are not eating at night because their parents are neglectful and they can't afford it. Or looking around at all the kids that are abused and called by CPS. And I'm like, I don't think you've got a plan. And so that's a big wake-up call.
Yeah.
Watching the ACA and talking about ACA a long time ago and Talk Heathen. And I like the two platforms. I think Matt has, I feel like he's, had it to hear with the exact same questions and answering the exact same thing. But I mean, it's a more of aggressive kind of thing that you can go and you can debate. And I really like the platform of Talk Heathen where you can just come and discuss and you're not attacked usually.
You have to go pretty far. You have to poke the bear quite a bit to get attacked on Talk Heathen, but it happens every so often. I love that you've been a watcher. I love that. That's awesome. I'm so.
And this is the first time I got the guts to call in, and the poor person, the screener, I was like hyperventilating. She's like, "Okay, take a breath," and I was like, "Okay, I hope I'm good until I get on."
Well, you did great. It's such a good call, such a good conversation. Thank you for sharing with us, Laurie.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you as well.
Bye-bye.
Oh, my head's gonna swell like crazy over the next couple of months, I swear.
Laurie touched on something, and I've been thinking about it a bit lately. Talking with some friends, the debate, the contest of knowledge, the contest of rhetorical skills, the back and forth, the battleground of ideas. That's one aspect of coming out of that religion and interacting with the world. But there's so much more than just the debate. There's also the community. There's also the finding the commonality. And although I really do like it when Matt really holds someone to the fire, I really, really like it when Matt engages with people on that human level. And he does do it. He might be famous for being aggressive and debate, but
everybody likes it when the hosts go beast mode, I think they call it. Beast. I've gotten that once. One time did I go beast mode, according to other people. I don't think I got there, but in comparison with my normal, calm, tranquil demeanor, I think it probably stood out. We did have a question from somebody who was actually in my live chat earlier, who wanted to get some help on a subject. So I did copy this into here, and so let's read through this real quick. It says, my question is about consent in sex and what constitutes sexual assault or rape. And he stresses that he's operating out of ignorance here. My wife abandoned me and my son on April 4th. We did not see it coming. The Tuesday before she left, we both signed a 60-month loan on a car. The Thursday before, we were intimate. I'm telling you this to let you know that my son and I did not know that she was going to leave us. After chewing through all the emotions that come with the end of a marriage, I've been finding myself incredibly pissed off. Had I known what she had in mind, I would not have signed my name on a 60-month loan. Had I known she was going to leave me, I sure as hell would not have had sex with her. At this point, I'm stuck on my anger. How can I classify what she did to me? Do I call it rape or sexual assault? She took away my consent to have sex. She used sex to keep me complacent until she could, quote unquote, hatch her plan. He stresses that he is not in any way comparing his experience to anything that women historically have had to go through in terms of sexual assault. But he says that I'm thinking if I have a name for it, then I can help work through it, which makes sense. Labels are important and they can help you classify things and fit them more neatly into the fabric of the story that you're telling about yourself. So I get that. I'm curious, Johnny, what do you think about this?
I'm not comfortable answering this question just because of the ethical requirements that would sort of restrict my response in this.
As an attorney, you probably could not.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, well, you're useless.
Yep. Not the first time. Won't be the last.
I am going to say, first of all, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. This is horrible and traumatizing, and of course you're angry. Of course there's going to be so many conflicting emotions that that are happening right now for you, for your kid who has to deal with this. So first of all, don't beat yourself up for feeling bad. Don't beat yourself up for not knowing how to feel right now or for feeling conflicting things. That's expected. That's normal. That's healthy. And that's totally something that you have a right to. In terms of what to call it, I'm a little bit on the fence here, and I'll tell you why. On the one hand, I can see how that would be taking advantage of you and not giving you all the knowledge that you needed in order to make a consensual choice in the matter. So if you had all the information, you would have chosen differently. And that is definitely a problem, and I definitely agree with that. That said, I am hesitant to call it rape or assault just because those are very legal, kind of technical terms for certain actions. And a lot of the time, it does not include a willing action that is then regretted later. And blurring that line can be a little bit tricky. So I don't think that personally I would call that rape or sexual assault just because there are very strict legal definitions about what that means. But I definitely think she took advantage of you. I think that she should have shared all of the information and that it makes sense that you feel that way. And I know that's not probably the best answer, but I think that in cases like this, calling it by what you feel. You felt taken advantage of. You felt like she lied, and she did. You felt like you were manipulated, and you were. And these are definitely problems that should be addressed. And I suggest I know you were talking about possibly getting counseling once you can afford it. The Secular Therapy Project provides a really good resource for that, for talking about these issues in a secular and reasonable way without any of the woo or religion attached to a lot of it. So definitely check them out. But yeah, apart from that, I think that I can just empathize with you and tell you that what you're going through is real and the way that you are feeling is valid. And yeah, I mean, thank you for asking the question, though. That is it's important that you air this out and that you have that support of the community that we have here.
I would like to second what you said, but I could also say that what you're describing here is somewhat of a complex situation. I do believe that I have to recommend that you should probably consult with an attorney on this matter. You're dealing with a 60-month car loan. You're dealing with, obviously, an ending marriage. An attorney would be able to help you sort through, not only a good attorney would help you sort through the emotions of it and be your advocate through that difficult process of separating yourself from your wife, not just emotionally, but also socially and financially. The system is set up such that there are protections for people when this kind of thing happens. Can I guarantee that you're going to get a fair and equitable split? No. Unfortunately, the system is not perfect, but this is complex enough. Too many people are afraid to engage the services of an attorney because of the cost. And that is a legitimate concern because attorneys are expensive. They can be quite affordable. I don't know what your economic situation is. There's a lot we don't know, but there are services available to people who are sort of short on cash. But if you can afford an attorney, but it's just going to put you in a bad financial position, a consultation oftentimes can be very low investment into that. And you might consider hiring an attorney just because you're going to be spending a lot of money or you're going to be losing a lot of money. A good attorney is going to evaluate your case and help you determine whether or not it's worth it. I turn clients down on a fairly regular basis just because the cost to hire me is far exceeds what they're going to save. But whenever you're dealing with, dividing up an estate like that, you can get into significant amounts of money. Sometimes people will say, I just want to be done with it. I just want to walk away. And then in years to come, they often regret it because they got railroaded. Your wife might hire an attorney, or your wife might have the benefit of sympathy just for one reason or another. I would seriously consider at least consulting with an attorney. Now, that's not all you're going to do. If you have access to a therapist, please consult with one. They say that some of the most difficult things to deal with, what is it? Divorce, death, losing a job. There's a list of things that are very hard on your health. And this is going to affect you, your health, your mental health, your child. Something you need to look into, I think.
Right. Thank you, Johnny, and that you're not as useless after all. I hope this helps. If you do have more questions for us about this, I highly encourage you to call back next week when Christy is back. Christy is the therapist after all, and probably will be able to give you a whole new slew of information and research and help that I simply am not qualified to give, nor is my guest tonight. But it was a good question. It was a good conversation, I think. And I think that we should definitely hear back from you soon. We do have another call on the line, but I do want to make sure that we're moving through this interview. So let's talk a little bit about intervention first, and then speak with our next caller. You were going to talk about white knighting a little bit. Do you want to? Sure. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Right. I don't know what the technical term for white knighting is, but we've seen it on the internet. We've seen it in the comments. Whenever a person comes to the defense of another, oftentimes unsolicited. One of the first week that I was in law school, I may have mentioned this on one of the shows, but I don't know. It's something from the first week of law school. It's a phrase that stayed with me. I love the phrase. The example is you're driving down the street and you get to a stop sign, someone cleans off your windshield and then demands payment, right? Mm-hmm. That's the example of it. That's called being an officious intermeddler. And it just sounds so legally, right? I've never used it. I've tried to shoehorn it into things.
Yeah. Well, now you're reading comments, so you've got a lot more. You've got a lot more room to call people officious intermeddlers. But no, there is that line between being an ally and being a white knight, and the difference there is. And I hate this term so much because it gets thrown around, but it is virtue signaling, right? And virtue signaling is when you want to appear woke or appear educated or appear a good person. And so you say the thing that you're supposed to say without any intention of backing it up with anything significant. And that's how I describe that. So being a white knight in order to garner favor with somebody is not really allyship. That doesn't really help. I read through this entire comments section because I'm a masochist that had to do with my new haircut. And there is this one person. I don't know who this person is. I've never talked to them before. And they were defending my decision because of the shape of my head. And there's just this commenter on the internet talking about the shape of my head, like in relation to whether or not I should have cut my hair and what the motive was behind it. And it's like, why? Why do you do this? If you want to help, get out there and educate someone about non-binary issues or something. But that's not helpful. That's not being an ally. That's being performatively woke. And that's not the same thing. But let's talk a little bit about intervention just as a concept. So I was going to move into advocacy next, but I thought in the way that we are structuring this, you have to educate yourself first. That is the prime directive for this concept. And advocacy is something that you have to continually do. It is just a way of life. It is a decision to advocate for other people as often as you can, and in as many ways as you can, by lending your platform, by donating money, by going to a protest, however it is that it looks in your life. Advocacy is kind of a long, just general worldview and practice. But kind of in between those two are these moments of intervention, and these moments where you, as somebody with some form of privilege, whether that's white privilege or straight privilege or cis privilege or any kind of privilege, steps in and redirects an attack. And this could be hopefully not a physical one, but in certain cases, in Austin, during the protests, they had a bunch of white people who volunteered to stand in the front row of the protest when they were facing off with the police because they knew that they were less likely to get shot. And that is a most extreme example of intervention.
Yeah.
Smaller examples could be what our mods do in the chat, right? In gently correcting, hey, let's not talk about people's looks on the show. Or, hey, V goes by they, them. And those subtle forms of intervention as well. Those moments where you slip in and just, act as that shock absorber a little bit. And It's an uncomfortable place to be. It's not fun. It's dangerous sometimes. It's often uncomfortable, but it's definitely necessary. And that is going to be the true test, I think, moving forward, is who is willing to intervene as well as advocate and educate.
Right. And it doesn't only have to be when there are attacks on a particular person, physical or rhetorical attacks. Sometimes there are just conversations. You're getting together with your friends and something's being bandied about and you weigh in on it. And you might choose to let the issue go, or you might choose to start talking about it, ask questions, try to find the boundaries of the person's belief. This happens to me on a fairly regular basis. Something that I think is important to remember, and I have to remember this myself, because when you're dealing with certain topics, I'm staying vague, but it could be anything. When you're dealing with a topic that you have an emotional stake in, it's incumbent upon you to try to remain calm and to try to make sure that the purpose of communication is to convey ideas. And as an attorney, the whole purpose of my communication is to advocate for a position, right? Mm-hmm. As a person, it's to get at the truth, but as an attorney, it's to advocate for a position. And when I'm talking with friends about certain issues that we don't agree on, I can give in to the hatred that I have for a particular position or a particular phrase or whatever it might be. But those of us who are in a position to make a difference, I think we really ought to, and to meet the person where they're at, and start talking about, sort of like a street epistemology approach to having conversations with your friends and family. Mm-hmm. You're not going to necessarily win that conversation. It's something that you need to plant a seed and engage in a dialogue and be open to the idea that you might be the one who walks away with a different notion. As non-believers, so often there is an aura of arrogance surrounding some people. Mm-hmm. We've all run into those people.
Those people.
They're
not true atheists, though.
No. In the comments, you see how stupid people are. And I get it. I might be thinking it too. But the truth is they're not stupid. They've been indoctrinated. They're on autopilot. They truly believe certain ideas, and they put those ideas before everything else. Mm-hmm. And everything else is in light of those notions. And so when you approach somebody, you need to approach them with some amount of respect, although some positions are so heinous, it's hard to maintain that respectful tone.
But I do like this concept of, and thank you for expanding on this. It's not just an action, whether that's a physical action or a speech act. that intervenes. It's also intervening in a cyclical thought process, and intervening in again, that bubble, that worldview where you just slip in. You just slip in and push it off the track slightly, see what happens. And intervening in that subtle way, in a street epistemology type way, where you say, well, why do you think that? Or, well, who told you that? How confident are you in that? And just asking questions like this can intervene in those very subtle ways. And it's, of course, going to be case dependent, right? We're not advocating that you go to a protest and try street epistemology. That's not probably going to work very well. But if you are having a conversation with an individual, say it's a family member who isn't quite getting something, and you don't want to alienate the person, but you do want to make sure that your point is heard and understood, a subtle intervention in the form of street epistemology, in the form of having these kinds of conversations, is also a very valid and a very brave way to go through this process of allyship. It is also uncomfortable. It can also be painful or dangerous. There may be emotional stakes there that are very real. But making that sacrifice for the greater good, for the good of humanity, as secular humanists, the needs of the many, right?
Right. Well,
but I think focusing on intervention both as large actions, but also as subtle conversation is very important.
So I think there can be a temptation when you find someone who you find to be so completely off the mark that you just want to proportionately hit them with words and ideas so that you just knock them with one argument or one encounter, right? Dr. Soren from Star Trek Generations, right? All he had to do is move the ribbon just a tiny bit. And you remember what I'm talking about? It just takes.
Who are you talking to? Yes, of course.
Over time, if you go home and you're talking to a parent, you're talking to an aunt or uncle or someone else, and they're going off about who knows what, the riots, the police brutality issues, whatever it might be, you engage with them sincerely. Don't get snarky and nasty. Unless you're willing to give up on taking the high road, and just be a voice of reasonableness. Listen to what they're saying. They might gish gallop you. They might throw 20 reasons why their position is right.
Right.
Maybe just stick to one, and then at Easter, can deal with the next one.
And here's a good thing to note as well. There are a couple things here. First, we're talking to allies. We are not talking to people who are personally in jeopardy in any way. So this might also be a good tactic for you to use if you feel safe and comfortable doing it. We are not saying that you need to put yourself in that position if you are not safe. This is for people who otherwise would be considered part of the in-group, right? And who have the ability to speak without those repercussions to the same level. So I wanted to make that clear first. But also, we do have a really good question in the chat, which is, when is it not your place to speak in defense of someone? And that's a really good question, because that can definitely happen. And I think that the consideration that you have to have there is the whole, the white savior complex. It's similar to the white knight complex. It's a little bit different in that a lot of the time, in order to get involved, people feel like they need to be at the forefront. They need to be, the spokesperson for an issue. And a lot of the time, that isn't what's needed. And in fact, that can be very detrimental because, again, that experience, that education component, oftentimes the people in the in-group are not aware of all of the nuance and the experience of the people in this out-group. And so they cannot speak well to it, nor should they. This is not their platform. So one way to know whether or not your intervention is required is look around the room, this hypothetical room. Is somebody else speaking? Does that person have more authority in the sense that they are the ones experiencing this? Do they look like they want to be there? If not, maybe step in, ask them if they want to go have a conversation, get them out of the conversation if they're looking uncomfortable. But for the most part, the goal of intervention is only when there is a direct need for it. Advocacy, I think, is something different. Advocacy, I think the goal is not to speak yourself, not to intervene, not to put yourself in the situation, but rather platform the voices of the people who need to be heard. Intervention is definitely a subcategory of that, where if there is a problem and you can be the buffer for somebody else, then you should be. If that distinction makes sense there.
It does. I think it does to me. I've thought oftentimes, although it doesn't have to be physical, about a tag team partner, right? If there is a conflict.
That means something different in secular sexuality, just so you're aware.
Well, I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about, let's say you and I are out someplace and someone's causing trouble, or there's a conversation that is uncomfortable. I'm not going to speak for you, V. You're more than capable of speaking on any issue better than me. But there may be an opportunity where you look over or you give me a hint or something, and I'm waiting in the wings, right? Mm-hmm. You want to be a knight of some kind? Forget about being a knight. Be a tag team partner. Let your companion, your friend, your person that you're with, let them speak for themselves. And if they're looking for assistance, make sure you're listening for the kind of assistance they're looking for. Are they looking for mm-hmm. a buffer? Are they looking for, I want to get out of here? Are they looking for actual physical protection? Are they looking for some data? Don't just assume that, a lot of times when we think of conflict, our media so often is flooded with these grandiose, giant explosions, space battle, fist fight, Huntmaster 5000 kind of stuff, and yelling and shouting. No. That does happen. But I think the big change in life happens in polite conversations, the meeting of ideas, subtle, gentle redirections. I hear what you're saying about that. I understand your concern about A, but have you given a thought to B? Because in my experience, B. And then maybe, that's all it takes. But don't just jump in and speak for others. Speaking for others is part of the problem. That's extremely patronizing. I may have an opinion on something. I don't always have to share it. Right? Exactly.
Strange concept for the internet. Not everybody needs your opinion all the time.
Right.
People need to tell me that on Twitter more often. But let's jump to our last caller for the night before we round out with some talk about advocacy. We are talking to Lisa in Alberta, Canada. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, V. Hi, Johnny.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. What can we help you with today?
So I was just listening to you guys talk, and I think you may have covered the answer to this question already. But just a little bit of kind of tailoring this to a specific situation and discussing the true difference between white knighting and being an ally. So I had a specific situation come up a few months ago. I was in LA with just a group of people. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. We were having dinner. One particular individual just out of the blue said, "Have you guys noticed how many homosexuals there are here?" And it made me incredibly uncomfortable, like just immediately. I had no idea what to say, but the fact that I got uncomfortable got my spidey senses going, as V would say. So I said, just like absolute word vomit and being put on the spot. I have a really good friend who's gay, and looking back, I think I said that because I was trying to establish that you can't say anything negative, like stop talking if you're going to go there, because I would have been offended. But do I even have the right to be offended, I guess, is one of my questions. And when I said that, it completely backfired on me, because as soon as I said that, another girl piped up and said, "Oh my God, I've always wanted a gay friend," which immediately just hit me across the face like a slap because I thought like, I just screwed this up even more. And, you just objectified a human being. Like I would say, hey, I want a puppy. Like it was just so offensive to me, but do I have the right to be offended? And in that particular situation, should I have said something at all? And if so, what would you guys recommend would be an actual intelligent response rather than my ridiculous word vomit?
Well, that's an amazing story and so perfectly encapsulates exactly what we're talking about. So I'm so glad that you called in. Thank you, Lisa. First of all, yes. You have every right to be offended by that. That is not something, your offense is a good thing in that instance. I am offended by a lot of what is happening right now. It is real, actual offense. It is, how dare you? Do you not understand? Are you ignorant? Are you off? Like, what's going on? Like that kind of offense, that kind of anger, that frustration that you feel is such an important catalyst for allies, because it's not there is this level of, allies are not attached to the issue, so they can be objective and intelligent and like intellectually fight the battle that the people actually on the ground are doing, like emotionally. But that's not accurate. Allies can be just as emotionally invested in the outcome as the people on the ground, as the people who are actually facing whatever form of oppression we're talking about. And that motivation is so strong and so good. So yes, 100% you have a right to be offended, and your offense in that situation was called for and so cringe. In terms of what you probably could have said, I think one way that I might diffuse the situation would be to make a positive spin on it, and say, isn't it great? And then just wait to see what the response to that would be. Mm-hmm. Or, I didn't notice. Because the more you make people explain themselves when they come across in that way and say something that could be considered offensive, if you make them come out and say what they're actually trying to say, they're probably going to get very embarrassed and shut up. So if the statement was, there are so many homosexuals here. Oh, how can you tell?
How can you tell?
Well, yeah. There are dudes with tight pants and pink shirts. Are you saying that everybody who wears tight pants and pink shirts is? Well, no. What I'm saying is that there's and just go at it, just lightly, just not aggressively. Just pick at that and see how long you can get them to talk until they realize that they're being stupid.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I wish I could go back in time.
Unfortunately, there will probably be other opportunities to do that.
You always think of the best things when you're away from the situation. There's some French phrase for it. I don't know what it is, but a friend of mine.
You'll remember it after the situation happens.
Stairwell thoughts or something like that as you're walking down the stairs. I should have said that. I agree with V. I have a very calm demeanor because right now I'm not being challenged in any way. But when I am confronted with things that I find to be toxic and poisonous for the society that we live in, for friends of mine that I have, and I don't want them to be subjected to that, to the future and to children who will grow up in a world that has to deal with this kind of nonsense, I get really mad. So many things can trigger my anger. And, does that matter to me? No, but I have a sense of justice. I've been teased a lot about, Justice Johnny over the years, how I have to right wrongs. And the times that I've maintained a level head and been able to keep some kind of distance, some sort of emotional distance, and approach it strategically have been the times when I think I've been most effective. The times when I'm yelling at somebody at the grocery store because they're doing something terrible, I'm just hurting people's feelings. And although that might be satisfying in the moment, and that's not what you were trying to do, but although it might be satisfying on some emotional level, the ultimate goal, right, is to make the world a better place, to make that person, just to nudge them a little bit to make them self-aware, to hold up a mirror to them and see them as you see them.
Right.
Hurtful things that people say when no one is listening. And I don't want to keep talking, but if I could say this, as a cis white het male who's middle class or whatever I am, economically speaking, there are things that people will say to me that they might not say to others.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming that I fit a certain demographic because I resemble them physically. And on the whole, I'm quite happy that most people are quite aware and they're coming along nicely. Every so often I'll hear something that I find objectionable, and I have to remember to maintain my cool. But don't beat yourself up, please, Lisa, over not having the perfect phrase,
Mm-hmm.
the perfect response, because you're a person too, and you were emotionally affected, and emotions can really gum up the gears. So just try to do better. That's all we can do. Try to think of some light touch next time, because they're going to do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate you saying that, Johnny, because honestly, I think the fact that I've been thinking about that small situation for so long, like this happened months ago, just shows me how uncomfortable I was and how not prepared I was. And I think that was the main goal of me calling today, is how can I be better prepared next time this happens, so I can have more of a better tactic or better way of approaching it. And I really appreciate both of you guys. I will take everything that you say to heart, and I just appreciate you listening too.
Thank you so much for calling in. I think that was an awesome way to kind of round this out with a really poignant personal example. Thank you so much for being an ally, Lisa, and for doing the work and for educating yourself and for asking for help when you need it. You're a role model for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, guys, for all the work you do. I hope you have a good night.
You too.
Take care.
Bye. Oof. Awesome. That was. I love it when the calls so perfectly fit with what we're talking about. Also, that sounds like a New Girl episode or something.
I don't know what that is.
You wouldn't.
Okay. Oh, why? Why do you say that? Why would?
Because I have weird TV habits.
And you're my
right.
friend, and you know the garbage that I watch. Is that why? Yeah.
There's no kung fu in it, so it's not of interest to you. All right, so let's talk about this last segment real quick, and then wrap up. Advocacy. So this is the third portion of this. We've talked about educating yourself. We've talked about intervening. What does it look like to advocate for somebody or for a group of people? What does advocacy look like in practice?
Oh, that's a really good question. You're asking that to me.
I am, yes.
Well, I mean, I make, until the recent events, I make regular monthly donations to charities that I believe are fighting the good fight, mm-hmm. and putting tools into the hands of those right on the front lines. ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Guttmacher Institute, different groups. That's kind of an obvious thing, but not everyone has the extra cash.
Yeah,
I don't have the extra cash right now, and we're all in a very precarious position. You can volunteer your time. You can join different organizations that provide a phone support, internet support for people that are on those front lines.
Yeah, this is a great segue into this. If you're interested in providing support to people who are trying to get out of their religious backgrounds and deconvert and deconstruct The Recovering from Religion Foundation Hotline Project is looking for volunteers, and they look for people who can be on the phone with these people and just offer a listening ear and maybe some help, some empathy, some resources as they start questioning the foundations of their belief systems. A lot of the people watching here, I know for myself, we know how difficult that can be. We know how traumatic and how that's just the first piece of the puzzle. And then everything else is eventually going to have to shift and change in order to make room for this new worldview. It's a hard process. And a lot of people are doing it, they think, all by themselves. So if you are interested in advocating for a group of people who really do need help, consider donating some time, volunteering at the Recovering from Religion Foundation's Hotline Project. I know that they're looking for volunteers right now. Another way to do that is, yes, donating to groups. Make sure that as you're doing this, that you're researching the legitimacy of these groups, and you're not just giving to anybody, that you are looking and making sure that the money is getting to the people you want it to get to. So that's always important. I know the Minnesota Relief Fund, I believe, which is the bailout kind of cash box that they've been gathering over the last 2 weeks, they've actually said, please donate elsewhere. We have all the money that we need right now. So go find other places to donate. So there will be, there are ways to do that, to research that. Again, part of education is making sure that you are doing that research and making sure you know where to go and where to give. That could also look like doing charity work or being part of a protest, or even so little. This is so little, but it's so important. If you have a social media account, if you have any kind of platform at all where people can see you, especially people who might still be stuck in a bubble and are attached to you by familial or friendly ties, platforming voices that need to be heard right now is so important. And here's something I actually learned, and it's a small trick, but it's very useful, and it's something that is a good Twitter best practice, in case you guys are interested in this. If you are going to retweet something, say by like a Black activist that you really enjoy, you really like, you think people should hear, don't retweet it with a whole comment thread of your own. Just retweet. Don't comment and retweet. Because what happens is, instead of their tweet getting the traffic and their profile getting the traffic, yours becomes the one that gets all the traffic. And just small little things like that. Retweet without commentary. Share your platform with people if you see things that you think other people should know, especially people who you might be their only door to these other worlds, to these other concepts. That is something to take into consideration. Reading books, watching movies. Netflix has some amazing and intense documentaries that you should be watching right now. I know a friend of mine who is a very avid bookworm. She cannot find books on race relations in America right now because they are sold out, which is amazing. And should continue. So doing that educating yourself. It doesn't need to be a long textbook. It could be a novel. It could be a Toni Morrison book or something. It doesn't need to be, a history course. Just learning about other people and opening yourself up. A great educational TV show that I absolutely enjoyed to the point where I cannot wait for season 2 is Pose. And it talks so beautifully about the intersection of being Black and being trans and being in the ballroom culture of the 1970s. And it's just so poignant and so beautiful and so well done. And it's enjoyable to watch. You should just go watch it, go binge it. So there are so many ways to be an advocate, to give money where it's needed, to give your time, just be a body in a space for a while. Just spend a few hours standing with people. It all makes a difference. It all makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the people in your life, have conversations just on a light note. People that you agree with, maybe flesh out some of the ideas that you have. Maybe you'll find that you learn quite a bit talk about friends who have had negative experiences with police officers. I'm heartened to see that a lot of YouTube police officers that are on YouTube are outraged and harmed and decrying the disgusting things that are happening out there in the world, not just this particular instance, but the things that have happened in the past. Don't resist the urge to demonize other people. They're wrong. Some are bad. Some may undertake evil actions, but everyone's the hero of their own story. Try to understand what is it exactly that makes them think that they're a hero in a particular instance. And you might find that there are hidden allies everywhere you go that just need an honest, open conversation with a little bit of kindness. That's been my experience in the past. I remember when I was working in a court system once upon a time, having a conversation. It was I guess a kind of an advocacy, but someone I worked with had said, I think marriage is between a man and a woman. And I said, okay, why is that? And then she gave her reasons. And then I said, well, what about, and maybe it was being ready for it. Maybe it's the fact that I'm an attorney and I'm always fighting all the time. I'm always angry. I don't know. But this is a person that I cared about. And I was willing to approach that person with caring and say, well, and I'm going to use fake names. What about Joe? You know that Joe has a partner, and Joe's partner and him have been together for how long? Oh, 25 years. Yeah, 25 years, Joe and his partner. Well, how do you feel about their relationship? Does it deserve respect? I could have come at her and said, you're a fanatic. You're sick. You're a hate monger. No, because I trusted in the inherent goodness of that person who had some information that I thought was limiting her perspective. And we talked about it. And in the end, I'm happy to say, she said, I hadn't really thought of it that way. And it was a long conversation. I don't know. I didn't follow up on it, but I bet you she's got a slightly different take on marriage equality now. Yeah. And maybe over time, just be patient, be kind. Don't come at people. Like what's the phrase? I've said this before. If your only tool is a hammer, then all of your problems start to look like nails. Be creative.
Right. There are times and places for the hammer, no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
But, oh, God, that's going to be clipped now. But yes, point well taken. There are different ways to go about this, and they are all scary to an extent, and they're all fraught, but they're all necessary. And one last thing before we wrap up, I do want to say, as there is this trend that happens where people who are sheltered, if they see somebody in their own life who they love going through something, or if they see somebody in their life who they love and they know is a good person, but they're also of X category that has been demonized, their perception shifts. It does. There is a shift that happens a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time when people come to grips with the fact that this person who they see as a three-dimensional, well-rounded, good person also identifies as this, also is this. So one way that we can help, for example, me, I have certain forms of privilege. I'm white. I pass. I can go not so much with the hair anymore, but I can go pretty much undetected if I wanted to in cis het spaces. So I have that ability, and I can use that privilege to help other people by coming out as bisexual, by coming out as non-binary, by broadening other people's views of just what it means to be different, what it means to be in a category that otherwise would be considered scary. And of course, only do this if you are safe, if you are taking your own safety and health into account. But if you have the opportunity to model quote unquote difference to your family, to your friends, to people around you in a positive way, that is going to spark a chain reaction in how they view other people who might not fit their stereotype of what that person should be. So that is also just a very small way to use your own privilege and your own struggle to help other people around you. Johnny, thank you so much for being on the show with me, for coming on. I know I ribbed you a little bit today, but it was so much fun to finally be on a show with you.
Agreed. This is the very apex of my YouTube career.
There you go.
Thank you.
Enjoy it while it lasts. It's going to last about 5 more minutes. Can
All
we
right.
get...
Oh.
Audio, but